good, Councillor, and thank you. I wish to again express my sincere horror, really, that the Minister and the Government have set their face against dealing with this issue in any shape, make or form. And they try to convince themselves, because they need to convince themselves, that they're doing something for the good of the survivors. And it takes some convincing in that, but if they can convince themselves of that, they can convince themselves of anything. We've all received thousands of impassioned pleas, from victims and survivors all over the country and beyond. And I'm sure the Minister has received them also, and all the TDs in Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, the Greens, and of course the regional independents who are backing this government to tick and tin, no matter what it is. The vast majority of them, all bar one or two, I think. So it's a sad day in our country that, we have talked about all the issues of the past, and we had the children's referendum, and we had the marriage referendum, and we had the referendum and the repeal, and we've supposed to be such a place now of openness and transparency and honesty. And New Ireland, some New Ireland, all right, when you look at this Parliament today, I see the legislation we're debating all morning. It's draconian, it's tyrannical, it's shocking. And then we see this legacy issue of horror and hurt, and indeed and disdainful treatment of our own citizens. We've moved on from all that now. We're supposed to be, the modern pluralist country, but this is shocking to think that they would now reject outright all the amendments, set their faces, and we can't get an answer. Deputy Cairns asked for an answer, she couldn't get it. We take it by silence of the Minister that he's not accepting any amendments, and to think that we're going to remove these documents now, and indeed 30 years forward. We had a great time in the millennium, which is 20 years ago now, Councillor, when many schools and many communities put capsules into the ground. We were all delighted and wondering who would be digging them up in 100 years' time and what they'd think of us then. But this capsule is going into the ground, or being buried somewhere, and God knows it's a murky one. It's a dirty one. It's not a joyous one anyway. It won't be, and history won't be kind to this government and to Minister O'Gorman and his government. I could call them a cabal, no, but they have a majority. They are elected, and they'll come together, cobble the government together with the aid of independence. But I can't believe it, and the people looking in can't believe it. And all right-thinking people, young and old, from the age of reason, would think this is an abhorrence in this day in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm just in disbelief. And we know Minister Sapone, a former minister, did convene a forum or kind of a place that some survivors, a good few came out, I understand, and engaged with them in kind of a listening process. And they made it quite clear, as many have to me personally, and all other deputies, I'm sure, that they don't want anonymity. They want their names to be out there. They want to be recognised as human beings, as people who have suffered, who have been literally lives almost destroyed, and have fought back from that and come back from that and want to move on with their lives. And they want to have their records, this idea that we're protecting. This is emergency legislation or rush legislation, which is always bad legislation, by the way, no pre-legal scrutiny. This government, I say, we're only a short time in being. I think, going back to the one from 11 to 16, I think this will pass them out for lack of legislation, scrutiny of legislation, guillotines by another name. And the latest trick in the book is to blame the Business Committee for everything. You chair the Business Committee, do a fine job on it. It happened here again today, Deputy. You don't need to blame the Business Committee for the way we're dealing with the bill. The facts are that the government are just a name using the Business Committee. We object, but we're just steamrolled because they have a majority. And it's so sad, and will be sad, and will be a blight on this House and the Convention Centre, but in the Oireachtas, to do this to these cohort of people who have suffered enough, who have suffered for long time, and what went on in our mucky past, and now we're trying to suppress it again. So these people, all they want is openness, honesty and transparency, and to be allowed to go on with their life. But this piece of legislation and an outright refusal to accept any amendment, it's like, a country that we read about in Eastern Europe in the past days that would set their face against any kind of reform, any kind of common decency, any kind of dealing with the opposition and kind of trying to embrace them. And we will look for together to be in all this together. And I'm always saying, in the curl of Kayla, but in this case, the government know best, and they know everything. And whereas ministers, inside in these shells, when they become ministers, the body's trying to break out of the straitjacket they're in. And whether they're not allowed by senior civil servants, and I don't want to demonise any senior civil servant, but the system seems to be, has to be protected above all else. This sacred system can't be questioned, can't be gone against. We must toe the party line. But this is going to end in tatters. Tatters. But apart from the tatters, and I'll finish now, Concola, it's going to end in grief, and more prolonged grief for the survivors, I hate calling them victims, but they were in many cases, for their families, and for their children and grandchildren and generations to come. And it's an appalling vista. Go